Understanding human behavior. The science behind people, emotions and everyday interactions. Introduction. The hidden patterns behind human behavior. Have you ever wondered why people behave the way they do? Why a friend suddenly becomes distant? Why strangers argue online with such intensity? Why some people stay calm under pressure while others panic? Why we sometimes make decisions that we know are not good for us. Every day, we are surrounded by human behavior. We see it at work, in our families, in traffic, in conversations, on social media, and even in the quiet decisions we make when nobody is watching. But here is something fascinating. Most of the time, people don't actually understand why they behave the way they do. And that includes you, and me. Human behavior is shaped by a complex mix of emotions, experiences, beliefs, biology, social pressure, and hidden mental patterns. Many of these forces operate quietly beneath the surface of our awareness. Think about the last time you reacted emotionally to something. Maybe someone criticized you. Maybe you felt jealous of someone's success. Maybe you instantly liked someone you had just met. In those moments, your brain was processing thousands of signals, memories, expectations, emotional triggers, past experiences, all in a fraction of a second. And the result of that invisible process was your reaction. A feeling. A thought. An action. Understanding these invisible forces is one of the most powerful skills a person can develop. Because when you understand human behavior, something remarkable begins to happen. People start to make more sense. The coworker who constantly interrupts others. The friend who always seeks attention. The person who seems overly defensive. The leader who inspires everyone in the room. Instead of feeling confused or frustrated, you begin to see the deeper psychological patterns behind their actions. You start to recognize the emotions driving people's choices. You start to notice how beliefs shape decisions. You begin to understand how social pressure quietly influences entire groups of people. And perhaps most importantly, you start to understand yourself. Why you feel certain emotions. Why certain situations trigger stress or confidence. Why some relationships feel effortless while others feel exhausting. Psychology is often thought of as something complicated, academic, or reserved for scientists and therapists. But in reality, psychology is simply the study of how people think, feel, and behave. It's the study of everyday life. Why we form habits. Why we trust some people but not others. Why we fall in love. Why we hold on to beliefs even when they might be wrong. These patterns influence every area of life: relationships, careers, leadership, friendships, conflict, communication, and personal growth. When you begin to see these patterns clearly, you gain a powerful advantage. You become better at understanding people. Better at communicating. Better at managing emotions. Better at navigating difficult situations. And better at building meaningful connections with others. Throughout this audiobook, we will explore the fascinating science behind human behavior in a way that is clear, practical, and relatable. You won't need a background in psychology. You won't hear complicated academic jargon. Instead, you will discover simple ideas that explain some of the most complex behaviors we see every day. We will explore questions like: why do people form strong beliefs? Why do emotions sometimes overpower logic? Why do groups influence our choices more than we realize? Why do certain personality types clash while others connect naturally? You'll also learn how to recognize difficult behaviors, improve communication, and apply psychological insights to everyday life. Along the way, you may start noticing things you've never paid attention to before. The tone of someone's voice during a disagreement. The subtle ways people seek approval from others. The emotional signals behind someone's reaction. You'll start to see the patterns behind actions. And once you see those patterns, the world of human behavior becomes far less mysterious. But there is another important reason to understand psychology. It helps us become more compassionate. When we understand the fears, motivations, and emotional triggers behind people's actions, it becomes easier to respond with patience instead of anger. It becomes easier to listen. Easier to connect. Easier to lead. And easier to grow. Because at the end of the day, every human being is navigating their own internal world of thoughts, emotions, fears, and hopes. Sometimes those worlds collide. Sometimes they misunderstand each other. But when we begin to understand the deeper forces shaping human behavior, we gain the ability to bridge those gaps. So in the chapters ahead, we're going to take a journey into the fascinating science behind people, emotions, and everyday interactions. We'll uncover the hidden mechanisms behind our decisions. We'll explore why people think the way they do. And we'll discover practical ways to apply psychological insight to real life. Because once you begin to understand human behavior, you don't just see people differently. You see the entire world differently. And it all begins with understanding the foundations of why people do what they do. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Foundations of Human Behavior. Take a moment to think about the last decision you made today. Maybe you chose what to eat for breakfast. Maybe you decided whether to respond to a message. Maybe you chose to listen to this audiobook because you're curious about how people think and behave. At first glance, these decisions seem simple. Almost automatic. But behind every action you take, your brain is performing an incredible amount of hidden work. Your past experiences, emotions, habits, social influences, and even your biological instincts are quietly shaping your behavior, often without you even realizing it. Human behavior is not random. It follows patterns. Psychologists have spent decades studying these patterns, trying to answer one fundamental question. What actually drives people to think, feel, and act the way they do? To understand human behavior, we need to look at the key forces that influence our actions. These forces work together constantly, shaping how we respond to the world around us. Let's explore the most important foundations of human behavior. Our brain, the command center of behavior. Everything we do begins in the brain. Your brain is constantly receiving information from the environment, sights, sounds, conversations, memories, emotions, and interpreting what they mean. Imagine walking into a crowded room. Within seconds, your brain begins analyzing dozens of signals. Who is here? Do I know anyone? Is this a comfortable situation or an awkward one? Where should I stand? Who looks approachable? Most of this processing happens automatically. Your brain is designed to make fast judgments to help you navigate social situations and stay safe. This ability developed over thousands of years of human evolution. Our ancestors lived in environments where quick decisions meant survival. Recognizing danger, understanding social hierarchies, and reading emotional signals were essential skills. Even though modern life is very different from the world of early humans, our brains still operate using many of the same instincts. This is why certain reactions feel automatic. For example, when someone criticizes you, your brain may immediately trigger a defensive response. When you receive praise, your brain releases chemicals that create feelings of pleasure and motivation. When you sense rejection, it can feel deeply painful, because social belonging has always been critical for survival. Understanding that many of our reactions are rooted in biology helps explain why behavior can sometimes feel automatic or emotional. But biology is only one part of the story. The role of experience. Every person carries a unique collection of life experiences. Childhood memories. Past relationships. Successes and failures. Moments of encouragement or criticism. These experiences form what psychologists sometimes call mental frameworks, internal maps that help us interpret the world. For example, imagine two people receiving the same feedback at work. Their manager says, "I think you could improve this part of the project." One person hears this and thinks, "Great, this is helpful feedback. I can make this better." The other person hears the same words and thinks, "They're unhappy with me. I must be doing a bad job." The situation is identical. The words are identical. But the reactions are completely different. Why? Because each person's past experiences influence how they interpret the message. Someone who grew up receiving encouragement may view feedback as helpful guidance. Someone who experienced harsh criticism may interpret the same feedback as rejection. Our experiences shape the lenses through which we see the world. Habits, the invisible drivers of behavior. Another powerful force behind behavior is habit. Many of the actions we perform every day are not carefully planned decisions. They are automatic routines. Think about your morning. Do you brush your teeth in a specific order? Do you check your phone shortly after waking up? Do you follow the same routine when preparing for work? Habits exist because the brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. If every small action required careful thought, daily life would feel exhausting. Instead, the brain creates shortcuts. Once a behavior is repeated enough times, it becomes automatic. This is useful for positive habits like exercising or studying regularly. But it can also reinforce negative patterns. For example, someone might develop the habit of checking social media whenever they feel bored. Another person might respond to stress by overeating or avoiding responsibilities. These habits are not always conscious choices. They become learned patterns. The important thing to understand is that behavior is often the result of repetition, not just intention. Motivation, why we do what we do. Another key driver of human behavior is motivation. Motivation answers a simple question. Why do people take action? Psychologists often divide motivation into two broad categories. The first is external motivation. This happens when behavior is driven by outside rewards or pressures. For example, working hard to earn a salary, studying to pass an exam, following rules to avoid punishment. External motivation is powerful, but it usually depends on outside incentives. The second type is internal motivation. This occurs when behavior is driven by personal interest, curiosity, or satisfaction. Examples include learning a skill because you enjoy it, helping someone because it feels meaningful, pursuing a goal because it aligns with your values. Internal motivation tends to be more sustainable. When people feel personally connected to what they are doing, they are more likely to stay committed. This explains why some people work passionately on projects they care about, while others struggle with tasks that feel forced. Understanding motivation helps explain many everyday behaviors, from career choices to personal goals. The need for belonging. Human beings are deeply social creatures. From the moment we are born, we depend on relationships. Family, friends, communities. Belonging to a group has always been essential for survival. Early humans who were rejected by their group faced extreme danger. Because of this history, our brains developed a strong sensitivity to social acceptance and rejection. This is why certain experiences feel emotionally powerful. Being included in a group can create feelings of joy and security. Being excluded can feel painful and discouraging. You might notice this in everyday situations. A person laughs when others laugh, even if they didn't find the joke funny. Someone changes their opinion slightly to match the views of a group. A teenager adopts the fashion style of their friends. These behaviors are often driven by a desire to fit in. The need for belonging influences everything from friendships to workplace dynamics to large cultural trends. Emotion and logic, a constant balance. Many people like to believe they make decisions purely based on logic. But research shows that emotions play a huge role in human behavior. In fact, emotions often act as the brain's decision-making shortcut. Imagine trying to make a decision without emotions. What job should you choose? Which partner should you trust? Which opportunity feels right? Without emotional signals, decisions become extremely difficult. Emotions help guide us by attaching meaning to experiences. Fear warns us of danger. Joy encourages us to repeat positive experiences. Anger signals that something feels unfair. However, emotions can also lead to impulsive decisions when they become too intense. Understanding how emotions influence behavior is essential, and we'll explore this much more deeply in a later chapter. The interaction of many forces. One of the most important things to remember about human behavior is this. There is rarely just one cause behind an action. Most behaviors are shaped by several influences working together. Imagine someone who reacts strongly during an argument. That reaction might be influenced by their personality, their past experiences with conflict, their current emotional state, their desire to be respected, the social environment around them. Human behavior is rarely simple. It is the result of many forces interacting at the same time. This complexity is what makes psychology so fascinating. Becoming more aware. Once you begin to understand these foundations, biology, experience, habits, motivation, social influence, and emotion, something interesting starts to happen. You begin to notice patterns. You notice why certain people react the way they do. You notice how environments influence behavior. You begin to recognize your own habits and emotional triggers. And awareness is powerful. Because when we become aware of the forces shaping behavior, we gain the ability to respond more thoughtfully instead of reacting automatically. In the next chapter, we will explore another crucial aspect of human behavior. Why people think the way they do. We'll examine how beliefs form, how perception shapes reality, and why two people can see the same situation in completely different ways. Because before we understand actions, we must first understand the mind behind them. Chapter 2. Why people think the way they do. Have you ever noticed how two people can experience the exact same situation, and walk away with completely different conclusions? Imagine two coworkers leaving the same meeting. One person says, "That meeting was productive. We made good progress." The other says, "That meeting was a disaster. Nothing was solved." Same room. Same conversation. Same people. Yet two completely different interpretations. Why does this happen? The answer lies in one of the most fascinating aspects of human psychology. Our thoughts are not simply reactions to reality. They are interpretations of reality. In other words, we don't experience the world exactly as it is. We experience the world through the filter of our minds. Our beliefs, expectations, past experiences, and mental habits shape how we interpret everything around us. To understand human behavior, we must first understand how people think. The brain is a meaning-making machine. Your brain is constantly trying to make sense of the world. Every moment, it receives an enormous amount of information. Conversations. Facial expressions. Tone of voice. Body language. Memories. Social signals. If the brain tried to analyze every detail logically, we would become overwhelmed. So instead, the brain simplifies things. It creates shortcuts to quickly interpret situations. These shortcuts are known as mental patterns. They help us make fast judgments about people and events. For example, if someone smiles warmly when they meet you, your brain quickly labels them as friendly. If someone avoids eye contact and gives short answers, you might assume they are uninterested or uncomfortable. These interpretations happen almost instantly. Most of the time, we don't even notice the mental process happening. But these quick interpretations can sometimes lead us in the wrong direction. Because our brain isn't just processing the present moment. It is also pulling information from the past. How beliefs shape our thinking. One of the strongest forces influencing our thoughts is our beliefs. A belief is simply something we accept as true about the world, ourselves, or other people. Some beliefs are helpful and empowering. Others can quietly limit the way we see opportunities. Let's look at a simple example. Imagine two students preparing for an important exam. Student A believes, I'm capable of learning difficult things if I work hard. Student B believes, I'm just not good at this subject. Now notice how these beliefs shape their thinking. Student A sees challenges as opportunities to improve. They are more likely to study longer, ask questions, and keep trying. Student B may become discouraged quickly. When something feels difficult, they may interpret it as proof that their belief is true. The belief becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. The same pattern appears in many areas of life. Someone who believes people are generally trustworthy may approach relationships openly. Someone who believes people will eventually betray them may approach relationships with suspicion. The belief changes how they interpret other people's behavior. And over time, those interpretations shape their experiences. The power of perception. Perception is the way we interpret the information we receive from the world. It's important to understand something surprising. Perception is not the same as reality. Instead, perception is the brain's interpretation of reality. Think about how misunderstandings happen in everyday conversations. A manager gives brief feedback to an employee. The manager believes they were clear and professional. But the employee perceives the tone as cold or critical. The manager may simply have been busy. But the employee's perception shapes how they feel about the interaction. This happens constantly in human relationships. We don't just react to what people say. We react to what we think they mean. Tone of voice. Body language. Facial expressions. All of these signals influence how we interpret situations. Sometimes our interpretations are accurate. Other times, they are influenced by assumptions. And those assumptions can lead to misunderstandings. Mental shortcuts and thinking biases. Because the brain is constantly processing information, it relies on shortcuts known as cognitive biases. These biases help us make quick decisions, but they can also distort our thinking. One common example is the confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to notice information that supports our existing beliefs while ignoring information that contradicts them. Imagine someone who believes their coworker dislikes them. If the coworker forgets to say good morning one day, the person might think, "See, they're ignoring me." But if the coworker greets them warmly the next day, they may dismiss it as unimportant. The brain quietly filters information to confirm the belief. Another common bias is the first impression effect. First impressions tend to be powerful and long-lasting. If someone appears confident during the first meeting, we may assume they are capable and intelligent. If someone appears nervous, we may assume they are less competent. Even when we later receive new information, our minds often hold on to the original impression. This doesn't mean people are irrational. It simply means the brain is trying to simplify a complicated world. But understanding these mental shortcuts helps us recognize when our thinking may be incomplete. The stories we tell ourselves. Humans are natural storytellers. We constantly create stories to explain what is happening around us. For example, imagine you send a message to a friend and they don't reply for several hours. Your mind might begin creating explanations. Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they're ignoring me. But the reality might be something much simpler. Perhaps their phone battery died. Perhaps they are busy at work. Perhaps they simply haven't seen the message yet. Yet the story we create in our mind can shape our emotions. If we assume rejection, we might feel anxious or frustrated. If we assume they're busy, we remain calm. The story changes the emotional experience. This is why our thoughts have such a powerful effect on our feelings and behavior. The influence of environment. Our thinking is also shaped by the environment around us. Family, culture, education, and social groups all influence how we see the world. A child raised in a supportive environment may grow up believing that effort leads to success. A child raised in a highly critical environment may develop a fear of making mistakes. Cultural values also influence beliefs. Some cultures emphasize individual achievement and independence. Others emphasize community cooperation and shared responsibility. These values influence how people think about goals, relationships, and personal identity. Even the people we spend time with can shape our thinking. If your close friends are optimistic and motivated, you may begin to adopt similar attitudes. If the people around you are frequently negative or pessimistic, that mindset can also spread. Human thinking is rarely formed in isolation. It is constantly influenced by the social environment. Emotional thinking. Another important factor influencing thoughts is emotion. When emotions are strong, they can reshape how we interpret situations. For example, when someone feels anxious, their brain becomes more alert to possible threats. A neutral comment may suddenly feel like criticism. A small mistake may feel like a major failure. On the other hand, when someone feels confident and happy, they often interpret the same situations more positively. Emotions act like filters for our thoughts. This is why two people in different emotional states may interpret the same event very differently. Learning to recognize emotional influence is an important step toward clearer thinking. Why people hold on to their beliefs. One of the most interesting aspects of human psychology is how strongly people hold on to their beliefs. Even when presented with new information, people often resist changing their minds. Why? Because beliefs are connected to identity. When someone challenges a deeply held belief, it can feel like a personal attack. The brain reacts defensively, trying to protect the existing worldview. This is why arguments rarely change people's opinions. In fact, strong arguments can sometimes make people defend their beliefs even more strongly. Understanding this can help us approach disagreements more thoughtfully. Instead of trying to prove others wrong, it can be more effective to ask questions and encourage open discussion. People are more likely to reconsider their beliefs when they feel respected and heard. Becoming more aware of our thinking. One of the most powerful skills a person can develop is awareness of their own thinking patterns. When we become aware of how our thoughts are formed, we gain more control over how we respond to situations. Instead of automatically accepting every thought as fact, we can pause and ask questions. Is this assumption accurate? Am I interpreting this situation fairly? Could there be another explanation? This simple habit of reflection can reduce misunderstandings, improve relationships, and lead to better decisions. Because thoughts are powerful. They influence how we feel. They influence how we act. And they shape the way we experience the world. Thinking shapes behavior. When we look at human behavior, we often focus on visible actions. But behind every action is a chain of thoughts. Someone avoids a conversation because they believe it will lead to conflict. Someone pursues a dream because they believe success is possible. Someone becomes defensive because they believe they are being judged. Thoughts lead to emotions. Emotions influence actions. And actions create results. Understanding how people think gives us insight into why they behave the way they do. But there is another powerful force that works alongside thinking. Emotions. In the next chapter, we will explore how emotions influence decisions, relationships, and everyday behavior. Because sometimes, even when logic tells us one thing, our emotions lead us somewhere completely different. Chapter 3. The Power of Emotions. Think about the last time you made a decision that didn't seem entirely logical. Maybe you bought something you didn't really need. Maybe you said something in anger and later regretted it. Maybe you avoided an opportunity because it made you feel nervous. In those moments, something powerful was influencing your behavior. Emotion. For a long time, people believed that emotions were the opposite of rational thinking. The idea was simple: logic leads to good decisions, while emotions interfere and create problems. But modern psychology has revealed something surprising. Emotions are not just reactions. They are essential guides for human behavior. In fact, without emotions, decision-making becomes extremely difficult. People who suffer damage to the emotional centers of the brain often struggle to make even simple choices. They can analyze options logically, but they cannot determine what matters most. Emotions provide the signal that says, "This is important. This matters. This feels right." Or sometimes, "This feels wrong." To understand human behavior, we must understand the power emotions hold over our thoughts and actions. What emotions actually do. At their core, emotions are signals. They evolved to help humans respond quickly to important situations. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors faced constant challenges, danger, competition for resources, the need to cooperate with others, and the need to protect their families. Emotions helped them react quickly without needing long periods of analysis. Fear helped them escape danger. Anger helped them defend themselves. Joy helped them recognize rewarding experiences worth repeating. Love helped them build strong social bonds. Even though modern life is very different from the world of early humans, our emotional systems still operate in much the same way. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment, asking silent questions. Is this safe? Is this threatening? Is this rewarding? Is this meaningful? Emotions are the brain's way of answering those questions instantly. Emotions shape our decisions. Many decisions we believe are logical are actually influenced heavily by emotion. Imagine someone choosing between two job opportunities. Both jobs may offer similar salaries and responsibilities. On paper, they appear nearly identical. But one job might simply feel more exciting. The company culture may feel welcoming. The environment may feel energizing. Those emotional signals play a powerful role in the final decision. Even small everyday choices are guided by emotion. Why do we choose certain foods? Often because they bring comfort or pleasure. Why do we prefer certain music? Because it triggers emotional memories. Why do we enjoy spending time with certain people? Because they make us feel understood, valued, or relaxed. Emotion gives meaning to our experiences. Without it, life would feel flat and directionless. The speed of emotional reactions. One of the most interesting aspects of emotion is how quickly it operates. In many situations, emotions appear before conscious thought. Imagine walking down a quiet street at night when suddenly you hear a loud noise behind you. Your body might react instantly. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. You turn around quickly. Only afterward does your mind analyze what actually happened. Perhaps it was just a door closing or someone dropping something. But the emotional reaction came first. This rapid response system exists because it helped humans survive in dangerous environments. It's better for the brain to react quickly to a possible threat than to wait for perfect analysis. However, this same system can sometimes create problems in modern life. Because emotional reactions can be triggered even when there is no real danger. Emotional triggers. An emotional trigger is something that causes a strong emotional reaction, often based on past experiences. For example, imagine someone who grew up in a household where criticism was frequent and harsh. As an adult, even mild feedback at work might trigger a strong emotional response. The comment may not be intended as harsh criticism, but the brain connects it to earlier emotional experiences. Triggers can exist in many forms. A tone of voice. A particular phrase. A type of situation. Even certain environments. These triggers activate emotional responses before we have time to analyze them logically. Understanding emotional triggers, both our own and those of others, is an important step toward managing reactions more effectively. The influence of mood. While emotions are often short-term reactions, mood is a longer-lasting emotional state. Mood quietly shapes how we interpret the world. When someone is in a positive mood, they tend to interpret events more optimistically. Small problems feel manageable. Conversations feel enjoyable. Opportunities feel exciting. But when someone is in a negative mood, the same events may feel completely different. Small problems may feel overwhelming. Neutral comments may sound critical. Opportunities may feel risky or stressful. Mood acts like a filter that colors our perception of everyday experiences. This is one reason why people sometimes react differently to the same situation on different days. Their mood has changed. Emotional contagion. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed the emotional atmosphere? Maybe the room felt tense. Maybe it felt energetic and enthusiastic. Emotions are surprisingly contagious. Psychologists call this phenomenon emotional contagion. Humans naturally mimic the emotional expressions of those around them. If someone nearby is laughing and smiling, we often begin to feel lighter ourselves. If someone is visibly stressed or angry, we may begin to feel uneasy. This process happens largely without conscious awareness. Our brains automatically read facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language. These signals influence our own emotional state. This is why one positive person can sometimes lift the mood of an entire group. And why one negative person can bring down the atmosphere of a meeting. Emotions spread through social environments faster than most people realize. The emotional brain versus the thinking brain. Psychologists sometimes describe two systems in the brain that influence behavior. The emotional system, which reacts quickly and instinctively. And the thinking system, which analyzes situations more slowly and logically. Both systems are important. The emotional system helps us respond quickly to important signals. The thinking system helps us evaluate situations carefully and plan long-term decisions. Most of the time, these systems work together. But sometimes they clash. Imagine receiving a critical email from a colleague. Your emotional system might react immediately with frustration or defensiveness. Your thinking system might suggest pausing before responding. In these moments, the balance between emotion and reflection becomes crucial. Learning to pause and engage the thinking system can prevent impulsive reactions. Why strong emotions can override logic. When emotions become very intense, they can temporarily overpower rational thinking. This is why people sometimes make decisions they later regret. During moments of strong anger, fear, or excitement, the brain prioritizes emotional responses over careful analysis. For example, someone might send an angry message during an argument. Someone might make an impulsive purchase during a moment of excitement. Someone might avoid an opportunity because anxiety feels overwhelming. These actions are not necessarily irrational. They are the result of powerful emotional signals guiding behavior in the moment. Understanding this helps explain why emotional regulation is such an important life skill. Emotional intelligence. Some people seem especially skilled at navigating emotions, both their own and those of others. This ability is known as emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence involves several key skills. Recognizing your own emotions. Understanding what causes them. Managing emotional reactions. Recognizing the emotions of others. Responding with empathy and awareness. People with strong emotional intelligence tend to communicate more effectively and handle conflict more calmly. They can sense emotional signals during conversations and adjust their responses accordingly. For example, they may notice when someone feels uncomfortable or defensive and shift the tone of the conversation. This skill is not something people are simply born with. It can be developed through awareness and practice. Learning to pause. One of the simplest yet most powerful emotional skills is learning to pause. When emotions are strong, our instinct is often to react immediately. But even a short pause can make a significant difference. That pause allows the thinking part of the brain to catch up with the emotional reaction. It creates space to ask questions like, What am I feeling right now? Why might I be reacting this way? Is there another way to interpret this situation? This moment of reflection can prevent many misunderstandings and unnecessary conflicts. It transforms automatic reactions into thoughtful responses. Emotions are not the enemy. Sometimes people try to suppress emotions because they believe emotions lead to mistakes. But emotions are not the problem. They are valuable signals about what matters to us. Anger may signal that something feels unfair. Fear may signal that something feels risky. Sadness may signal the loss of something meaningful. Joy may signal connection or achievement. Instead of ignoring emotions, it is often more helpful to understand them. When we listen carefully to emotional signals, they can provide important insights about our needs, values, and relationships. The emotional side of human behavior. When we observe human behavior, it can sometimes seem confusing. Why would someone risk a stable job for a new opportunity? Why would someone stay in a difficult relationship? Why would someone react so strongly to a small comment? Behind many of these actions are emotional forces. Hope. Fear. Love. Insecurity. Pride. Belonging. These emotional experiences influence behavior in ways that pure logic cannot fully explain. Understanding emotions helps us understand people. But emotions do not exist in isolation. They are constantly interacting with another powerful force that shapes human behavior. Other people. In the next chapter, we will explore how social influence and group behavior shape the decisions we make, often without us even realizing it. Because sometimes, the reason people act a certain way isn't just about their own thoughts or emotions. Sometimes it's about the invisible influence of the crowd around them. Chapter 4. Social influence and group behavior. Imagine you walk into a room where several people are already engaged in a conversation. At first, you might stay quiet, observing the tone of the group. You notice how people are speaking, what they're laughing about, and how they respond to each other. Slowly, you begin to adjust your own behavior. Maybe you match their level of formality. Maybe you adopt their sense of humor. Maybe you agree with ideas that seem widely accepted in the group. Without realizing it, you have begun responding to a powerful force, social influence. Human beings are deeply social creatures. From the earliest days of human history, survival depended on cooperation within groups. Living alone in the wild thousands of years ago was extremely dangerous. Those who formed strong social connections were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. Because of this long history, our brains evolved to be highly sensitive to the people around us. We naturally observe others. We learn from them. And often, we adjust our behavior to fit the group. Understanding this influence helps explain many aspects of human behavior, from everyday social interactions to large cultural trends. The desire to fit in. One of the strongest social forces shaping behavior is the desire to belong. Most people want to feel accepted by the groups they are part of. Family. Friends. Co-workers. Communities. When people feel accepted and valued within a group, they experience a sense of security and connection. But when people feel excluded or rejected, the emotional impact can be surprisingly strong. Psychological studies have shown that social rejection activates areas of the brain similar to those involved in physical pain. In other words, being excluded can literally hurt. Because of this, people often adjust their behavior in subtle ways to maintain acceptance. For example, imagine someone who joins a new workplace where most employees arrive early and work long hours. Even if the official work schedule doesn't require it, the new employee may start arriving early as well. Not because they were directly instructed to do so, but because they want to fit into the culture of the group. This process happens constantly in human environments. Group norms quietly shape behavior. Conformity, when people follow the group. Conformity occurs when people adjust their behavior or opinions to match the group around them. Sometimes this happens because people genuinely believe the group is correct. Other times, it happens simply to avoid standing out. Imagine a situation where a group of friends are discussing a movie they just watched. Most of the group says they loved it. But one person in the group didn't enjoy it very much. Instead of expressing their honest opinion, they might say something like, "Yeah, it was pretty good." Why? Because disagreeing with the entire group can feel uncomfortable. Conformity does not mean people are weak or easily influenced. It simply reflects the powerful human desire to maintain social harmony. However, conformity can sometimes lead to surprising situations. History provides many examples where large groups of people supported ideas or actions that, in hindsight, seem clearly wrong. Often, individuals within those groups had doubts. But few spoke up. Because standing against the group requires confidence and courage. The influence of authority. Another powerful form of social influence comes from authority. People often place significant trust in individuals who appear knowledgeable, experienced, or powerful. Teachers, managers, experts, leaders. When authority figures give instructions or express strong opinions, people tend to take them seriously. This influence can be extremely positive. Strong leaders can inspire teamwork, guide organizations, and help communities solve complex problems. But authority can also influence behavior in ways people might not expect. Sometimes individuals follow instructions simply because they believe the authority figure knows best. They assume the responsibility lies with the leader rather than themselves. Understanding this tendency helps explain why leadership carries such important responsibility. The actions and attitudes of leaders can strongly influence the behavior of those around them. The power of social proof. Humans often look to others for clues about how to behave, especially in uncertain situations. Psychologists call this social proof. When we see many people doing something, we often assume it must be the correct or appropriate behavior. Imagine walking through a busy city street and seeing a crowd gathered around something. Even if you weren't initially interested, you might feel curious. You may slow down or look in the same direction as everyone else. The crowd signals that something important might be happening. This same principle operates in many areas of life. Online reviews influence purchasing decisions. Trending topics influence what people read and share. Popular opinions influence what people consider acceptable. Social proof acts as a mental shortcut. If many people believe or do something, our brains assume there may be a good reason. Group identity. Another powerful social influence comes from group identity. People often define themselves partly through the groups they belong to. Nationality, religion, profession, sports teams, cultural communities. These identities help individuals feel connected to something larger than themselves. But group identity can also create divisions. When people strongly identify with a group, they may begin to see the world in terms of us and them. Members of their own group may be viewed more positively. Members of other groups may be viewed with suspicion or misunderstanding. This pattern appears throughout history and across cultures. It doesn't mean people are naturally hostile. Rather, it reflects how strongly social identity shapes human perception. Understanding this dynamic can help us approach differences with greater awareness and empathy. Peer pressure. Peer pressure is a specific form of social influence where people feel direct or indirect pressure to behave in certain ways to gain approval from their peers. This is especially common during adolescence, when social acceptance feels extremely important. Teenagers may experiment with behaviors simply because their friends are doing them. But peer pressure does not disappear in adulthood. Adults may also feel pressure to match the expectations of their social circle. For example, someone might spend more money than they plan to keep up with friends' lifestyles. An employee might stay silent about concerns during a meeting because everyone else appears to agree. Peer pressure often operates quietly. There may be no explicit demand to conform. The pressure comes from the desire to remain part of the group. The role of culture. Culture is another major force shaping behavior. Culture includes the shared values, traditions, beliefs, and social norms within a society. It influences how people communicate, express emotions, define success, and approach relationships. For example, some cultures place strong emphasis on individual independence. People are encouraged to express personal opinions and pursue individual goals. Other cultures emphasize collective harmony. People may prioritize group needs and social harmony over individual expression. Neither approach is inherently better or worse. They simply reflect different historical and social traditions. Understanding cultural influence helps explain why behaviors that seem normal in one society may seem unusual in another. It reminds us that human behavior cannot always be understood without considering the broader social context. The role of leaders and influencers. In every group, certain individuals tend to have greater influence. These may be formal leaders, such as managers or team captains. But influence can also come from informal leaders, people whose opinions are respected by others. These individuals often shape group attitudes and decisions. If an influential person expresses enthusiasm about an idea, others may feel more comfortable supporting it. If they express doubt or criticism, others may hesitate. Influencers also play a major role in modern digital culture. Online personalities, content creators, and public figures can influence the opinions and behaviors of large audiences. Their ideas can spread quickly across communities and platforms. Understanding how influence works helps explain how trends, opinions, and movements can spread rapidly through society. When groups improve decision-making. Groups are not just sources of pressure or conformity. When managed well, groups can actually improve decision-making. Different people bring different perspectives. One person may notice risks others missed. Another may suggest creative solutions. Collaborative thinking can lead to better outcomes than any one individual could produce alone. However, this only happens when group members feel safe expressing honest opinions. Healthy groups encourage discussion, questions, and respectful disagreement. This prevents the group from falling into what psychologists call groupthink, where everyone agrees simply to avoid conflict. Becoming aware of social influence. Social influence is powerful precisely because it often operates quietly. Many people believe their decisions are entirely independent. But in reality, our environment constantly shapes our behavior. This does not mean we are controlled by others. It simply means we are social beings who naturally respond to the people around us. By becoming aware of these influences, we gain more freedom in how we respond. We can ask ourselves questions like, am I agreeing because I truly believe this, or because the group does? Am I making this choice based on my values, or based on social pressure? Awareness allows us to balance independence with connection. The social nature of human behavior. Human behavior cannot be fully understood by looking at individuals alone. We must also look at the social environments in which people live. Families. Workplaces. Communities. Cultures. These environments shape how people think, feel, and act. But even within the same environment, people still behave differently. Two people raised in the same family may develop completely different personalities. Two co-workers in the same office may approach challenges in entirely different ways. Why? Because beyond social influence, another factor shapes human behavior in powerful ways. Personality. In the next chapter, we will explore how personality differences influence the way people think, react, and interact with others. Because understanding personality helps explain one of the most interesting questions in psychology. Why do some people thrive in situations that others find overwhelming? Chapter 5. Personality differences. Think about the people in your life for a moment. You probably know someone who is naturally outgoing, someone who can walk into a room full of strangers and immediately start conversations. You may also know someone who prefers quieter environments, someone who enjoys spending time alone reading, thinking, or working on personal projects. Neither personality is better or worse. They are simply different ways of experiencing and responding to the world. This is the essence of personality. Personality refers to the consistent patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that make each person unique. It shapes how we react to challenges, how we interact with others, and how we approach life's opportunities. Understanding personality differences is one of the most powerful ways to improve relationships and communication. Because many misunderstandings don't happen because people are wrong. They happen because people are different. What creates personality? Personality develops through a combination of several factors. Some aspects come from biology. From the moment we are born, people show natural differences in temperament. Some babies are calm and adaptable. Others are more sensitive or reactive to their surroundings. These early tendencies often continue to influence personality later in life. But biology is only part of the story. Life experiences also shape personality over time. Family environment, friendships, cultural expectations, and personal challenges all influence how people develop emotionally and socially. For example, someone who grows up in a supportive environment may develop strong confidence and openness. Someone who experiences frequent criticism may become more cautious or self-protective. Personality is not fixed at birth. It evolves gradually as people gain new experiences and learn new ways of responding to the world. The Big 5 personality traits. Psychologists often describe personality using 5 broad categories commonly known as the Big 5 personality traits. These traits are not labels that divide people into rigid types. Instead, they describe tendencies that exist along a spectrum. Everyone falls somewhere along each spectrum. Let's explore these traits and how they influence behavior. Openness to experience. Openness refers to a person's willingness to explore new ideas, experiences, and perspectives. People high in openness tend to be curious, imaginative, and interested in learning new things. They may enjoy traveling, trying new foods, exploring creative hobbies, or discussing complex ideas. People lower in openness often prefer familiarity and routine. They may feel more comfortable with established traditions and predictable environments. Neither approach is right or wrong. A highly open person may enjoy constant change and creativity, but may struggle with structure. A less open person may value stability and consistency, which can be extremely useful in many roles. Understanding this difference can help explain why some people love new adventures while others prefer familiar routines. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness reflects how organized, disciplined, and goal-oriented a person tends to be. People high in conscientiousness often plan carefully, follow through on commitments, and work steadily toward their goals. They are typically reliable and responsible. These individuals may enjoy creating schedules, setting long-term goals, and maintaining structure in their daily lives. People lower in conscientiousness may prefer flexibility and spontaneity. They may be creative and adaptable but sometimes struggle with organization or long-term planning. For example, one coworker may carefully prepare for meetings days in advance, while another may rely on quick thinking and last-minute preparation. Both approaches have strengths and challenges. But understanding these differences helps explain why people approach tasks in very different ways. Extroversion. Extroversion relates to how people gain energy from social interaction. Extroverts tend to feel energized by being around others. They often enjoy conversation, group activities, and social events. They may think out loud and feel comfortable sharing ideas quickly. Introverts, on the other hand, tend to recharge through quiet time and solitude. They may enjoy meaningful conversations with close friends but feel drained by large crowds or constant social activity. Introverts are often reflective and thoughtful, preferring to think carefully before speaking. This difference can sometimes lead to misunderstandings. An extrovert may assume an introvert is distant or uninterested. An introvert may feel overwhelmed by an extrovert's constant social energy. In reality, both personalities simply recharge in different ways. Agreeableness. Agreeableness reflects how cooperative, compassionate, and trusting a person tends to be. People high in agreeableness often prioritize harmony in relationships. They tend to be empathetic, supportive, and willing to help others. They may avoid conflict whenever possible. People lower in agreeableness may be more direct and competitive. They may value honesty and efficiency over social harmony. In professional settings, highly agreeable individuals may excel at teamwork and collaboration. Less agreeable individuals may be more comfortable challenging ideas or negotiating strongly. Both traits can be valuable depending on the situation. For example, leaders often need the ability to balance empathy with firm decision-making. Emotional stability. The final trait is emotional stability, sometimes described as the opposite of neuroticism. People with high emotional stability tend to remain calm and balanced even during stressful situations. They may recover quickly from setbacks and maintain a steady emotional outlook. People with lower emotional stability may experience emotions more intensely. They may worry more, feel stress more strongly, or react more quickly to challenging situations. This does not mean they are weak. In fact, people who experience emotions deeply can also be highly empathetic and sensitive to the needs of others. But understanding emotional tendencies can help people develop strategies to manage stress more effectively. Personality and relationships. Personality differences play a huge role in how people interact with one another. Many relationship conflicts are not about right or wrong. They are about differences in personality. For example, imagine a couple where one partner is highly organized and conscientious. They like schedules, planning, and detailed preparation. The other partner prefers flexibility and spontaneity. Without understanding personality differences, each person might become frustrated. One might think, why are they so rigid? The other might think, why are they so careless? But once they recognize their personality differences, they can begin to appreciate each other's strengths. The planner brings structure. The spontaneous partner brings creativity. Together, they create balance. Personality at work. Personality also influences how people approach work and leadership. An extrovert manager may lead energetic meetings and encourage open discussion. An introverted manager may prefer thoughtful planning and written communication. A highly conscientious employee may focus on organization and long-term projects. A highly open employee may generate creative ideas and innovative solutions. Successful teams often include a mix of personalities. This diversity allows teams to balance creativity, structure, empathy, and critical thinking. Problems often arise when people assume everyone should behave the same way they do. Understanding personality differences helps teams appreciate the strengths each individual brings. Personality is not destiny. While personality influences behavior, it does not completely determine it. People can learn new skills and adapt their behavior when needed. An introvert can develop strong public speaking abilities. A spontaneous person can learn organizational strategies. Someone prone to stress can practice emotional regulation techniques. Personality provides tendencies, not limitations. Growth happens when people become aware of their natural patterns and learn how to balance them. Understanding yourself. One of the most valuable aspects of studying personality is gaining insight into yourself. When you understand your personality tendencies, you can make choices that align with your strengths. For example, if you know you need quiet time to recharge, you can protect that time in your schedule. If you know you thrive on structure, you can create routines that support productivity. If you know you value creativity, you can pursue opportunities that allow innovation. Self-awareness helps people design environments where they can perform at their best. Understanding others. Equally important is understanding the personalities of others. When we recognize that people think and respond differently, we become more patient and adaptable. Instead of expecting everyone to communicate the same way, we learn to adjust our approach. With an introvert, we might allow more time for reflection. With an extrovert, we might engage in open discussion. With a highly conscientious person, we might focus on clear planning. With a highly open person, we might explore creative ideas. This flexibility improves communication and strengthens relationships. Personality adds color to human behavior. If every human being had the same personality, the world would feel incredibly predictable, and probably quite boring. Personality differences add variety to human interactions. They bring creativity, innovation, stability, empathy, ambition, curiosity, and countless other qualities into society. At the same time, these differences can create friction when people misunderstand each other's motivations. The key is not to eliminate personality differences. The key is to understand them. Because when we understand personality, we stop asking, "Why are they like that?" And we begin asking, "How can we work together more effectively?" But sometimes, personality differences are not the only challenge in human interactions. Some people behave in ways that feel difficult, negative, or even toxic. In the next chapter, we will explore why some people develop challenging behaviors, and how to respond to them with wisdom and emotional balance. Chapter 6. Understanding difficult people. At some point in life, everyone encounters difficult people. It might be a coworker who constantly criticizes others. A friend who seems negative about everything. A family member who refuses to listen to different opinions. Or someone who reacts with anger over small issues. These interactions can feel frustrating, confusing, and emotionally draining. You might ask yourself, why are they acting this way? Why do they seem so defensive? Why is it so hard to communicate with them? It's easy to label people as difficult and move on. But psychology suggests something deeper. Behind most difficult behavior, there are reasons. Understanding those reasons doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior. But it does give us the tools to respond more wisely. Because when we understand the psychology behind difficult behavior, we gain something powerful. Perspective. What makes someone difficult? The word difficult is often used to describe people whose behavior creates tension or conflict. This may include people who are constantly critical, easily angered, passive-aggressive, manipulative, overly controlling, negative or pessimistic. But it's important to recognize something. Most people do not wake up in the morning thinking, "How can I make everyone around me miserable today?" In many cases, difficult behavior develops as a response to past experiences, emotional struggles, or learned habits. What appears as hostility or arrogance on the surface may actually come from insecurity, fear, or frustration. This doesn't excuse harmful actions. But understanding the underlying causes helps us respond more effectively. Insecurity and self-protection. One of the most common roots of difficult behavior is insecurity. People who feel uncertain about their value or abilities may develop defensive behaviors to protect themselves. For example, someone who constantly criticizes others might actually be trying to protect their own sense of competence. If they focus attention on other people's mistakes, they feel less exposed themselves. Similarly, someone who acts arrogant or dismissive may be hiding a fear of being judged or rejected. These behaviors act like emotional armor. They create distance between the person and potential criticism. Understanding this pattern can change how we interpret certain behaviors. Instead of seeing pure hostility, we may begin to recognize underlying vulnerability. The role of stress. Stress is another major factor that can turn ordinary people into difficult ones. When people feel overwhelmed, tired, or under pressure, their emotional tolerance decreases. Small frustrations begin to feel larger. Patience becomes harder to maintain. Communication becomes more reactive. For example, imagine someone dealing with financial stress, family responsibilities, and demanding work deadlines. In that situation, even a small misunderstanding may trigger irritation or anger. The behavior may not reflect their true character. It may reflect emotional exhaustion. Recognizing the role of stress helps us avoid taking every negative interaction personally. Sometimes people are reacting to pressures we cannot see. Learned behavior. Another reason people behave in difficult ways is that they learn those behaviors earlier in life. Children absorb communication patterns from the environments they grow up in. If someone grows up in a household where conflict is handled through yelling or criticism, they may unconsciously repeat those patterns as adults. Similarly, if someone learns that manipulation or passive-aggressive behavior helps them get what they want, those habits may continue. These patterns often operate automatically. People may not even realize how their behavior affects others. Changing these habits requires awareness, emotional growth, and sometimes guidance. But the first step is recognizing that these behaviors were learned. The need for control. Some difficult behavior comes from a strong desire for control. People who feel uncertain about their environment may try to manage every detail around them. They may insist on doing things their way. They may struggle to accept alternative ideas. They may become frustrated when others behave unpredictably. This desire for control often comes from anxiety. If the world feels unpredictable, controlling small details creates a sense of safety. However, this behavior can make relationships challenging. Others may feel restricted, criticized, or unable to express their own ideas. Understanding the connection between control and anxiety can help us approach these situations with patience. The impact of unresolved emotions. Sometimes difficult behavior reflects unresolved emotional pain. Past disappointments, betrayals, or failures can leave lasting emotional scars. If these experiences are never processed or resolved, they may influence future behavior. For example, someone who experienced betrayal in a past relationship may become highly suspicious of others. Someone who faced repeated criticism may become defensive whenever they receive feedback. These emotional reactions are not always conscious. They can become automatic responses triggered by certain situations. Understanding this dynamic reminds us that behavior often reflects deeper emotional experiences. Why difficult people trigger strong reactions. Difficult people often provoke strong emotional responses. Why? Because their behavior can trigger our own emotional patterns. If someone criticizes us harshly, we may feel defensive. If someone dismisses our ideas, we may feel frustrated. If someone constantly complains, we may feel drained. These reactions are natural. But reacting impulsively can sometimes make the situation worse. Arguments escalate. Misunderstandings deepen. Relationships become more strained. Learning to manage our own reactions is one of the most effective ways to deal with difficult behavior. Setting healthy boundaries. One important strategy for dealing with difficult people is setting healthy boundaries. A boundary is a clear limit that protects your time, energy, and emotional well-being. For example, if someone constantly interrupts you during conversations, you might calmly say, "I'd like to finish my point before we move on." If someone repeatedly makes unreasonable demands on your time, you might say, "I'm not able to take that on right now." Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about clearly communicating what behavior you are willing to accept. Healthy boundaries create structure in relationships. They reduce confusion and help prevent resentment from building over time. The power of calm responses. Another effective strategy when dealing with difficult behavior is maintaining a calm response. When someone becomes angry or confrontational, our instinct may be to react with equal intensity. But this often escalates the conflict. Instead, a calm tone can change the dynamic of the interaction. For example, if someone raises their voice during a disagreement, responding calmly can help lower the emotional temperature of the conversation. Calm responses signal confidence and emotional control. They also prevent you from being pulled into unnecessary conflict. Choosing your battles. Not every disagreement requires a confrontation. Sometimes the most effective response is deciding whether the issue truly matters. Ask yourself, is this situation important enough to address? Will this conversation improve the relationship or simply create more tension? Is this behavior part of a temporary situation or a repeated pattern? Learning to choose your battles helps conserve emotional energy. It allows you to focus on the interactions that truly matter. Empathy without enabling. Empathy plays an important role in understanding difficult people. When we recognize that behavior may be influenced by insecurity, stress, or past experiences, it becomes easier to approach the situation with compassion. However, empathy does not mean tolerating harmful behavior. Healthy empathy involves understanding someone's struggles while still maintaining boundaries. You can acknowledge someone's frustration without accepting disrespect. You can listen to someone's concerns without allowing manipulation. This balance allows you to remain compassionate without sacrificing your well-being. Difficult people as teachers. Although challenging interactions can feel unpleasant, they sometimes offer opportunities for growth. Difficult people can teach us valuable skills. Patience. Emotional control. Clear communication. Boundary setting. These experiences may not always feel comfortable, but they strengthen our ability to navigate complex relationships. Over time, people who develop these skills become more confident in handling conflict and tension. Recognizing your own difficult moments. It's also important to remember that everyone has moments when they behave in difficult ways. Stress, frustration, or exhaustion can affect anyone. There may be times when we become impatient, defensive, or overly critical. Self-awareness allows us to recognize these moments and adjust our behavior. It helps us apologize when necessary and repair relationships. Understanding difficult behavior is not only about recognizing it in others. It is also about recognizing it in ourselves. The goal is understanding, not perfection. No relationship is completely free from conflict. Different personalities, expectations, and emotions will occasionally clash. The goal is not to eliminate every difficult interaction. The goal is to understand what drives those interactions and respond thoughtfully. When we approach challenging people with awareness and emotional balance, we gain greater control over how situations unfold. We become less reactive, more thoughtful, more resilient. And as we develop these skills, another powerful ability begins to emerge. The ability to communicate more effectively. In the next chapter, we will explore how communication shapes relationships and how understanding human behavior can help us build stronger, healthier connections with others. Chapter 7. Improving communication and relationships. Think about the most meaningful relationships in your life. They might be friendships, family connections, romantic relationships, or professional partnerships. Now ask yourself an important question. What makes those relationships work? In many cases, the answer comes down to one powerful skill. Communication. Communication is the bridge between people. It allows us to share ideas, express emotions, solve problems, and build trust. But communication is not just about talking. It is about understanding. And surprisingly, many communication problems do not happen because people intend to be rude or dismissive. They happen because people misunderstand each other. Learning how communication works, and how it sometimes breaks down, is one of the most valuable ways to improve relationships. Communication is more than words. When most people think about communication, they think about the words being spoken. But words are only one part of the message. Psychologists often point out that a large portion of communication happens through nonverbal signals. These include tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, eye contact, posture, timing. Imagine someone saying the words, "I'm fine." If they say it calmly with a relaxed expression, the message seems clear. But if they say the same words while crossing their arms, avoiding eye contact, and speaking in a tense tone, the meaning feels very different. The words are the same, but the emotional message changes. This is why communication is often misunderstood. People may focus on the literal words while missing the emotional signals that accompany them. Becoming aware of nonverbal communication helps us better understand what others are really trying to express. The importance of listening. One of the most overlooked communication skills is listening. Many people listen with the intention of responding. They begin forming their reply before the other person has finished speaking. But effective communication requires something deeper. Active listening. Active listening means giving the speaker your full attention and genuinely trying to understand their perspective. This involves several simple but powerful behaviors. Maintaining eye contact. Avoiding interruptions. Acknowledging what the other person says. Asking clarifying questions. For example, instead of immediately offering advice, you might say, "So what I'm hearing is that you felt frustrated when that happened." This simple reflection shows that you are paying attention and trying to understand. Active listening builds trust because people feel heard and respected. And often, people do not need immediate solutions. They simply want someone to understand how they feel. Why misunderstandings happen? Misunderstandings are common in communication because people bring different assumptions and experiences into conversations. Remember what we discussed earlier about perception. Two people can interpret the same situation very differently. For example, imagine a manager who sends a short message to an employee saying, "Please come see me in my office." The manager might simply want to discuss a routine task. But the employee might interpret the message as a sign that they are in trouble. Anxiety builds before the conversation even begins. This kind of misunderstanding happens because the brain fills in missing information with assumptions. Clear communication helps reduce these assumptions. Providing context, explaining intentions, and inviting questions can prevent confusion. The role of empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share another person's feelings. In communication, empathy allows us to step outside our own perspective and consider how someone else may be experiencing a situation. For example, imagine a coworker who appears irritated during a meeting. It might be easy to assume they are simply being rude. But an empathetic approach might consider other possibilities. Perhaps they are dealing with stress outside of work. Perhaps they feel their ideas are being ignored. Perhaps they misunderstood something that was said earlier. Empathy does not mean agreeing with someone's behavior. It simply means recognizing that their experience may be different from your own. This understanding often reduces tension and encourages more constructive conversations. Expressing yourself clearly. Communication is not only about understanding others. It is also about expressing your own thoughts and needs clearly. Many conflicts happen because people expect others to read their minds. They assume their feelings should be obvious. But in reality, people often interpret situations differently. Clear communication means expressing your perspective directly and respectfully. For example, instead of saying, "You never listen to me," you might say, "I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted because I'd like to finish explaining my thoughts." This approach focuses on your experience rather than accusing the other person. It invites discussion instead of creating defensiveness. The power of I statements. A useful technique for constructive communication is using I statements. I statements focus on your feelings and experiences rather than blaming the other person. For example, instead of saying, "You're always late," you might say, "I feel stressed when meetings start late because it affects the rest of my schedule." This approach keeps the conversation focused on the issue rather than turning it into a personal attack. People are more likely to respond positively when they feel respected rather than blamed. Managing conflict. Conflict is a natural part of human relationships. Different opinions, priorities, and personalities will occasionally clash. The goal is not to eliminate conflict entirely. The goal is to manage it constructively. Healthy conflict resolution often involves several steps. First, remain calm and avoid reacting emotionally in the heat of the moment. Second, focus on the issue rather than attacking the person. Third, listen carefully to understand the other person's perspective. Fourth, work together to find solutions that address the needs of both sides. When handled respectfully, conflict can actually strengthen relationships. It allows people to address concerns openly and develop deeper understanding. The importance of respect. Respect is one of the most important foundations of communication. Even during disagreements, maintaining respect keeps conversations productive. Respectful communication includes allowing others to finish speaking, avoiding insults or sarcasm, acknowledging valid points, remaining open to different perspectives. When respect disappears, conversations often become defensive and unproductive. But when respect remains present, even difficult conversations can lead to positive outcomes. Building trust through communication. Trust is built gradually through consistent and honest communication. People feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts when they believe they will be heard without judgment. Trust grows when people follow through on what they say. It grows when communication remains honest even during difficult discussions. And it grows when people demonstrate empathy and respect. Strong relationships depend on this foundation of trust. Without it, communication becomes guarded and cautious. With it, people feel safe expressing their ideas and emotions openly. Adapting to different communication styles. Just as people have different personalities, they also have different communication styles. Some people communicate directly and efficiently. Others prefer more thoughtful and detailed discussions. Some people express emotions openly. Others prefer to process emotions privately. Understanding these differences helps prevent misunderstandings. For example, a direct communicator may unintentionally sound blunt to someone who values a softer approach. Meanwhile, someone who communicates indirectly may appear vague to someone who prefers clear statements. By recognizing these differences, we can adjust our communication style to connect more effectively with others. The role of technology in communication. Modern technology has transformed the way people communicate. Messages, emails, and social media allow instant communication across long distances. But digital communication also removes many of the nonverbal signals that help us interpret meaning. Tone of voice and facial expressions are missing from most text-based communication. This can sometimes lead to misunderstandings. A short message meant to be efficient may be interpreted as cold. A delayed response may be interpreted as disinterest. Being aware of these limitations helps us communicate more thoughtfully in digital environments. Communication is a skill. The most important thing to remember about communication is that it is a skill. And like any skill, it improves with practice. No one communicates perfectly all the time. Everyone occasionally misunderstands or says something they later wish they had phrased differently. What matters is the willingness to learn and improve. Each conversation provides an opportunity to practice listening, empathy, clarity, and patience. Over time, these small improvements can transform relationships. Strong relationships are built through understanding. At its core, communication is about connection. It allows people to share ideas, solve problems, and support one another. When communication improves, relationships become stronger. Conflicts become easier to resolve. Trust grows. And people feel more comfortable expressing who they truly are. Understanding human behavior helps us communicate more effectively. But communication is only one piece of the puzzle. In the final chapter, we will explore how all the psychological insights we've discussed can be applied to everyday life. Because understanding human behavior is not just about knowledge. It's about using that knowledge to live and interact with others in a more thoughtful and meaningful way. Chapter 8, Applying Psychology in Everyday Life. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored the fascinating science behind human behavior. We've looked at how thoughts shape perception, how emotions influence decisions, how social groups affect our choices, and how personality differences shape the way people interact. But knowledge becomes truly valuable when we apply it. Understanding psychology is not just about analyzing human behavior from a distance. It's about using that understanding to improve everyday life. When you begin to recognize the patterns behind thoughts, emotions, and social influence, you gain the ability to navigate situations more effectively. You become more aware of your reactions, more understanding of others, more thoughtful in the way you approach challenges. In this chapter, we will explore practical ways to apply psychological insights in daily life. Becoming more self-aware. One of the most powerful applications of psychology is self-awareness. Self-awareness means recognizing your own thoughts, emotions, habits, and patterns of behavior. Many people move through life reacting automatically to situations. Something happens, and they respond instantly, sometimes without fully understanding why. But when you develop self-awareness, you begin to notice these internal processes. For example, you might begin to recognize what situations trigger stress or frustration. What environments help you feel focused and productive. What habits help or harm your well-being. This awareness creates space between stimulus and reaction. Instead of reacting automatically, you gain the ability to pause and choose your response. This simple shift can dramatically improve emotional control and decision-making. Managing emotional reactions. Emotions are powerful forces, but they do not have to control every action. Psychological awareness allows you to recognize emotional signals without immediately acting on them. For example, imagine receiving criticism at work. An automatic emotional reaction might be defensiveness or frustration. But if you pause and acknowledge the emotion, "I feel defensive right now," you give yourself time to think more clearly. You can then decide how to respond constructively. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding them and responding thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Over time, this skill reduces unnecessary conflict and improves relationships. Recognizing thinking patterns. Earlier we discussed how beliefs and mental shortcuts shape the way people interpret situations. Applying psychology in everyday life means paying attention to these thinking patterns. For example, if something goes wrong, the mind may jump to negative conclusions. "This always happens to me. I'm not good enough." But when you recognize this pattern, you can challenge it. Ask yourself, is this conclusion based on evidence? Is there another way to interpret the situation? Could I be overlooking other possibilities? This process encourages more balanced thinking and prevents small setbacks from turning into major discouragement. Improving decision-making. Understanding human psychology can also improve the way we make decisions. Many decisions are influenced by emotion, social pressure, or habit. But awareness allows us to pause and evaluate our choices more carefully. When facing an important decision, consider asking yourself a few simple questions. What are the long-term consequences of this choice? Am I making this decision based on pressure from others? Am I reacting emotionally or thinking clearly? Would I make the same choice after taking more time to reflect? These questions help slow down impulsive decision-making and encourage thoughtful choices. Over time, this habit leads to more consistent and satisfying outcomes. Strengthening relationships. Psychological insight can transform the way we interact with others. When we understand that people have different personalities, emotional triggers, and life experiences, we become more patient and flexible in our interactions. For example, instead of assuming someone is intentionally being difficult, we might consider other possibilities. Perhaps they are feeling stressed. Perhaps they misunderstood something. Perhaps their communication style simply differs from our own. This shift in perspective reduces unnecessary conflict. It allows conversations to focus on understanding rather than blame. Empathy becomes easier when we recognize the complex psychological forces shaping behavior. Responding instead of reacting. One of the most valuable psychological habits is learning to respond rather than react. A reaction is immediate and emotional. A response is thoughtful and intentional. Imagine someone says something critical during a conversation. A reaction might involve arguing, defending, or raising your voice. But a response might involve asking a question. Can you explain what you mean by that? This simple pause changes the tone of the interaction. It opens the door to understanding instead of escalation. The ability to pause before responding is one of the clearest signs of emotional intelligence. Creating positive habits. Psychology also helps us understand how habits form and how they can be changed. Habits develop through repetition. The brain creates shortcuts that allow behaviors to become automatic. This process can work for or against us. Negative habits often develop gradually, such as procrastination, unhealthy routines, or negative thinking patterns. But positive habits can also be built using the same principle. Small actions repeated consistently can lead to meaningful change. For example, reading a few pages each day can build a lifelong learning habit. Taking a short walk daily can improve physical and mental health. Practicing gratitude can shift attention toward positive experiences. The key is consistency. Over time, repeated actions become part of daily life. Understanding motivation. Psychology teaches us that motivation often works best when it connects to personal meaning. External rewards, like money or praise, can encourage behavior in the short term. But long-term motivation usually comes from internal sources. People are more motivated when they feel a sense of purpose, a sense of progress, a sense of autonomy. This insight can be applied to both personal goals and leadership situations. When people feel connected to the purpose of what they are doing, they naturally become more engaged. This principle applies in workplaces, education, and personal development. Handling social influence. Understanding social influence allows us to be more mindful of how groups affect our choices. Sometimes group influence is positive, it encourages cooperation and shared goals. But other times, social pressure can push people toward decisions that do not align with their values. By recognizing these influences, you can ask yourself, am I making this choice because I truly believe in it? Or because I feel pressure to follow the crowd? This awareness helps maintain independence while still benefiting from social connection. Practicing empathy. Empathy is one of the most practical applications of psychological understanding. When we recognize that everyone carries their own experiences, fears, and motivations, it becomes easier to approach interactions with compassion. Empathy does not mean agreeing with every viewpoint. It simply means acknowledging that another person's perspective is shaped by their experiences. Practicing empathy strengthens relationships, reduces conflict, and encourages more open communication. Even small gestures, such as listening without interrupting or acknowledging someone's feelings, can make a meaningful difference. Adapting to change. Life is constantly changing. New challenges, opportunities, and environments require flexibility. Psychology teaches us that people are capable of adapting and growing throughout their lives. When faced with change, some people resist because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. But understanding human behavior reminds us that learning and adaptation are natural processes. Instead of viewing change as a threat, it can be viewed as an opportunity to develop new skills and perspectives. This mindset encourages resilience and personal growth. Becoming a lifelong observer of human behavior. One of the most interesting outcomes of studying psychology is that you begin to observe the world differently. Conversations become more meaningful. You start noticing emotional signals and communication patterns. You become curious about what motivates people. This awareness does not turn life into a constant analysis. Instead, it deepens understanding. It allows you to approach human interactions with curiosity instead of judgment. The practical value of understanding people. Every day, we interact with people who have different personalities, emotions, and perspectives. Understanding these differences makes life smoother and more rewarding. It improves teamwork, strengthens friendships, reduces misunderstandings, and encourages more thoughtful decisions. Psychology is not just a field of academic study. It is a practical guide to navigating everyday life. The insights we gain from understanding human behavior can help us build stronger relationships, manage challenges more effectively, and continue growing as individuals. In the final section of this audiobook, we will bring everything together. We will reflect on the key lessons about human behavior and explore how awareness of these patterns can inspire a deeper understanding of both ourselves and the people around us.